I thought about us not using our real names on this.
Why?
Well, no, not for any other reason than just to be kind of cool. Because I wanted to be like Dr. Terminal or something.
Oh, okay. I got you now.
But I don't think I'm going to do that because it's lame. I mean, what else can you expect? I'm white and 35 years old. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Linux Cast, the premiere episode of the Linux Cast. I am your host, Matthew Weber. I am joined by Ricky Williams.
What up?
Now, I don't know what the hell we're going to do with this podcast. We're just starting. We're going to talk. I'm not even using Linux right now because apparently drivers are terrible. The person who invented drivers just needs to be shot because drivers are terrible. And that's not a Linux problem. That's just a problem across all platforms because drivers are terrible on Windows too, Ricky.
Yeah, well, that's
the only platform that doesn't have a problem with drivers is Mac. Yeah, so you just plug something in and it works for the most part. Thank you, Apple. That's about the only thing you've gotten right lately in the last decade. So in case you obviously you're new to the show because the show's new, dumbass. We're going to talk about every 2 weeks. We're going to come up with a couple topics. This week we're a little broad on topics. We're going to talk about why we used Linux for the first time, and then we're going to talk a little bit about our favorite distros and the distros that we've used. In the future, we'll talk about specific apps, specific distros, our experience with certain environments. We'll do some tutorials in the future where we can talk about certain ways that we've done certain things. Basically, Ricky and I are going to choose to be nerds, and it's going to be awesome. So we do another podcast, in case you didn't notice, and in case you didn't know, the three casts, and that we talk about movies. And we have to tone down our nerdiness a little bit on that show to not offend Vince's rather delicate sensibilities. So let's get started, Ricky. Why did you use Linux for the first time?
Okay, so this time around, it's not really my first time, but I would count it as my first time because it's like my most serious go at it.
We're not talking about your sex life, Ricky.
So it's like I use Windows for a whole bunch, so I'm like a Windows expert. Then I got into Mac. I know Mac back and forth. Linux, I've always been involved with it because I'm a network admin, but I've never actually used it. I just had like basic involvement to get in there and edit, like host files and all sorts of other little things with the VI editor. But I always thought, okay, this is cool. I'd love to learn it. I tried with Sushi once. That was a disaster, but that was way back when. The hardware sucked. I couldn't understand anything. The interface was crappy.
Talking about Suzy, right?
Yeah, Sushi. Well, yeah, Suzy.
However you pronounce it, Suzy, Sushi.
So,
now that I think about their logo, it's a fish, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I got that pronunciation from a Linux beard, so I'll go with that.
Who cares?
Next time around, I went with Mint, which I actually liked. I got it working and everything. The problem was that, it was a desktop at work. And at work, our environment's like 95% Windows. I was the only one using Linux. I couldn't really use it for work. It was more for just personal and educational purposes. But like that leaves me out because when I go home, I can't take it with me. And when I'm at work, I'm working, so I don't have much time to play around with it. So that kind of fell by the wayside. This time, the reason I got into it is because I started doing a ethical hacking course. And of course, they, recommended using Linux. And I said, what the hell? I could kill two birds with one stone, learn Linux. Started with Kali, I ran Ubuntu, tried to do Fedora twice now, which is a major pain in my ass. I think it just doesn't like me. So right now I'm running a dual boot with Kali and Ubuntu, and I've got another laptop which I just loaded up with Mint because I'd love to get back into it and learn more than one distro or two distros.
Oh man, so my story is much lamer than that. So there is an age disparity between Ricky and I of about 150 years. Ricky's about 900 and I'm 31. Yeah, that's math. That's public school math here in the United States. Anyways, there's a small disparity in age between Ricky and I. Ricky's what, you're 30, what, 30?
33.
Oh, that's not too bad. I thought you're much older than I am. I just went by the whole gray hair thing.
I look like Santa Claus, people.
Anyways, I'm 31. I'll be 32 in 13 days. Damn it. Anyways, I was in high school when I first tried Linux, so that's been a long time ago for those youngins out there. It was probably about 2001. So I got my first computer in 2000. It was about a $4,000 gateway computer, and it came in 12 boxes. I'm not kidding. It had this gigantic, probably 14-inch. What was the name of those monitors? The two monitors.
The
CRT monitors. God, that's so long ago since I've seen. There's still a CRT monitor sitting out in my living room. Hasn't been turned on in ages. It probably turned on to explode. Anyways, a guy I was working at Little Caesars, which is a pizza joint. He handed me he was like an Uber nerd. Like, I mean, he was like a coder, and he was just working there while he was going to college. I mean, he's way smarter than I was, but he knew I liked computers, so he handed me a CD with Suzy, probably, early Suzy for that, on a CD, and I just went home, plopped it in, and ruined my computer. I was like, oh, no, obviously I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I had just started. To that point, my only computing experience were the Apple IIs, which the school still used at that time, because we're poor in this country, and the brand new Windows 98 toting gateway computer. So I got on there, inserted the disk, and totally overwrote the hard drive, so I lost all of my stuff. Not that it mattered at that time, because at that time, I was me and my family were more focused on creating greeting cards with our computer. That's all we did. I don't really remember the Print Shop 8.0 or whatever that you'd get like Office Max for free after a mail-in rebate. We always would go in there, get the mail-in rebate stuff, and then plop it in and make greeting cards and all that. Really stupid. So I got to remember, at that point I was 15 years old. So I mean, I was just young. Anyways, I completely ruined my hard drive because I lost all my stuff, and then kept reinstalling, and ended up actually corrupting the hard drive and having to get a new hard drive. And needless to say, I didn't use Linux for a while after that. Once I got through college, I decided to start getting into, Linux again, mainly for work. So unlike where you work, Ricky, we're a mixture of all platforms where I work.
Okay.
So, especially on the server side, we have Windows and Linux servers. Primarily, the Linux stuff is more for our web-based content, whereas the Windows stuff runs the network.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to remember, I studied history in college, which has absolutely nothing to do with computers. So despite the fact that I was really into computers and actually got my first certification while I was still in high school towards the end, I didn't know anything about, IT or anything until I decided I was going to go through and get some certification so I could get this job. And then I just started studying. It was just whatever. But I didn't know anything about Linux really until I got into got the job, because mostly I was Microsoft certified, right? So I ended up having to put myself through a boot camp for Linux servers. So
Yeah.
basically, that's what my experience is in enterprise Linux. And even then, what we use is a custom distro, so it's completely different from anything else that's out there for the most part. So when I go home and try to install Ubuntu on my computer, I'm like, I don't understand any of this stuff. I don't know it. I mean, I'm really cautious because you got to remember the last time I tried to install Linux on a home computer, I ruined everything. So I'm really cautious, like, even though I know a lot more about computers now than I did before, obviously, I'm still very nervous about it. So that's one of the things, like, if I had to give one piece of advice, if you're going to just start off on Linux, if you're curious about what Linux is and you want to go through and install it on your computer, make sure you're following directions. So one of the biggest things I would actually suggest is use Ubuntu, because it's the most user-friendly install. It's not the most customizable of the Linux, obviously. So you have to fight a little bit more on Ubuntu if you want to go through and customize it. Whereas, like, with something like, I'm assuming, Mint or Fedora, if you could get it installed. I know, like, Red Hat, which is the base of what we use at work, that's very customizable, right? Even in the personal, individual. Whereas Ubuntu, their goal there is to make that much more mainstream. It's very much easier to install, and you're less likely to fry your computer, compiling it and getting everything ready to go. So that'd be my advice if you're just getting into Linux. And I actually still don't have Linux installed here at home, because I'm so nervous about it. Plus, we noticed when I installed it the first time this last weekend and had to uninstall it, I used Ubuntu, and the driver for my microphone didn't work, so I just cleared it off because I really want to use Linux to host the show, right? So I'm going to end up trying Mint as my next one. All right, so you talked a little bit, Ricky, about the ones that you've used. Out of the ones that you've used, what's your favorite?
Out of the ones that I've used, probably Ubuntu is my favorite, because that's the one I've used the longest. But I don't know, there's something about Mint that I really like. I gravitate towards it, which is funny because Ubuntu is more OS X looking, whereas Mint is more Windows looking, right? So it's like, it's funny because, like, Mac OS is my daily driver, so you'd figure that I'd be more, happy about Ubuntu, right? But I don't know, there's something about, like I said, I'd really love to try Fedora, but for some reason it hates me. Like, the first time I installed it, it had a problem with my Wi-Fi. I tried to get the driver working. My screen just wouldn't, like, the graphic card just wouldn't, whatever I changed, like, fucked that up. So then I was like, oh, screw this. This is too much work, right? And this time around, I tried to do it. It wouldn't even install. I kept getting an error. So I was like, oh, fuck this. Fedora just doesn't like me. I put Mint on the same USB stick, and the installation went like a breeze. So, but out of all of them, for me, I would say, I mean, it depends what, like, for a regular user, I would say definitely Ubuntu. But with my reading seems to suggest that Mint is a little faster on older hardware. I don't know if I see that.
On Mint, which desktop do you use? Do you use Cinnamon or?
Oh yeah, I went with Cinnamon. The first time I installed it, I was on KDE.
Right, so KDE is the old really old one, that and GNOME or whatever how it's pronounced. But see, I've never actually used Mint before. I actually just looked in. This is the one that I've downloaded tonight, and I chose the Cinnamon one too, based on looks, because it kind of looks cool. Whereas the other one, I can't remember what it was called. They had 4 different.
There's like, I can't even remember, and I just looked like the other day too.
Yeah, maybe I should go look. Seeing as how we have a little time, go ahead and keep talking, Ricky.
So like I was saying, it would depend on what you're doing. Like, if you're if you're trying out Linux because you kind of want to get into the whole ethical hacking thing, then of course Kali's gonna be your better distro because that's what it's geared towards. It has all the tools pre-installed on it already. Like you can install all those tools on the other distros, but like that one already comes with it. So why would you want to go to a different one, right?
Yeah.
Um,
See, I won't be getting into any of that. I have no interest
yeah,
in really hacking,
like I mean, you know, and but then again, that one is specifically geared towards that. So if you're looking to just sort of get your feet wet and you use it as a personal computer, you know, because when you go into Kali, you're using it as root all the time, which of course they suggest you don't do that, right? But the tools you're using require that sort of access, right? Whereas if you're using it as an everyday thing, you could really damage it by doing, you know, different configs and taking out stuff you shouldn't and stuff like that. So again, depending on what you're looking to get into, you know, but for me, yeah, I definitely like Ubuntu.
Yeah, the other Mint environments are so there's Cinnamon, there's Mate, there's XFCE, maybe XBase, maybe I don't know,
Yeah,
and then KDE.
yeah,
It's interesting that they don't offer GNOME or whatever.
yeah.
One of these days. So my personal problem with Linux is that I don't know how to pronounce anything. I always pronounce it wrong, right? So like there's GNU, which is GNU, which
Yeah.
is GNU is not Unix, right? That's something you learn early on. So there's a whole bunch. they don't do abbreviations very well in the Linux world. I found. So I guess my favorite would be, like I said, I haven't used Linux. So here's the one what I've used from a personal standpoint. I've used SUSE, and that it was my first experience with Linux and was disastrous, as I've said. I've used Red Hat at home, which was another horrendous experience. Mainly because not necessarily because it was, I was unable to use it. It's just more Red Hat is much more focused towards enterprise, and it was like it just wasn't suited towards personal computing for me at the time. You got to remember this was the beginning of college. I've used Ubuntu primarily. That's basically, again, it was because when I installed it on that laptop, it was for, I installed that because it was the easiest one to use, and they just come out with the new Unity that I can't talk, the new Unity desktop at the time.
Yes.
So I used that, and while I like the Unity environment, I actually preferred KDE. So it was, it was a trade-off for me, and that's actually what drove me away from Linux for quite a while. That's because I didn't care for the Unity environment that much. And then I'm gonna use Mint next, I think, and I'm gonna use the Cinnamon.
Yeah, that's the one
desktop.
I went with. It's very pretty, I'll tell you that much.
It looks very much like Windows,
Yes.
which now that I think about it worries me a little bit because I hate Windows.
Well, it doesn't act like it, so it's just sort of, if you're familiar with Windows, I think you'll like it because then you like with Ubuntu, right? If you install something you want to find it, you got to go and do that search from the dock, right? Whereas this, you got your fly out windows, so it's a lot easier, right? Like for certain people just they're a little more reserved, right? So they won't go out and search and look for stuff because they're scared of breaking something. You know what I mean? So if it kind of looks like something they're used to, then they know how to navigate it more.
Yeah, I agree with that. My real question is, so I've never used Mint before. Do they have like an app store, or is that something that you have to
No, they have an app store and everything. And
That's one of the
it's
things
very
that,
similar to Ubuntu, right? Because I think they're both Debian based.
yeah, they are.
But Ubuntu is just a little more polished. Like if you look at the difference between the App Store on the both of them, you'll see like Ubuntu has, it'll have like categories and like top picks and all this sort of stuff, whereas Mint, it's like they have a few categories, but it just looks a little like they're working on it. You know what I mean? Like it looks like it's a little more behind.
Mm. Well, they're smaller, so
Yeah.
um. All right, so let's move on to our picks of the week. So, Ricky, why don't you go ahead and tell us about your pick?
Sure. My pick is Terminator. It's a terminal emulator, and it is awesome. I love it so much. There's so much you can do. You can have multiple windows. You can change the color. You can do things like have one window automatically when you start it up log in as root. So, for instance, if you don't want to, sudo every command, you can have one window where it's your regular user, one as root. So, for certain commands, you pop into that window, you do your thing. Other, all the rest of the stuff you can do in the regular user side. But I mean, it's just great. Like you can have three windows vertically side by side, four windows in the square pattern, whatever. It's just awesome.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, it's
I definitely have to download that. All right, so the first app that I will definitely probably install on whatever distro I end up using is going to be Thunderbird.
okay.
So I live in email, basically. I message, quite a bit. Ricky and Vince and I have tried multiple messaging applications, and quite a few of them are terrible. If Apple would get their pants on and get iMessage to Android, we'd all use iMessage. And I guess I missed the whole text messaging craze, Ricky. Because I mean, young people supposedly really like the text message, but I'm just not a text messenger. Maybe it's because I hated T9 or whatever the hell that tap and click was on flip phones. I despised that. So maybe I just avoided it as much as possible. But anyways, because I don't enjoy messaging like that, I live in email, which makes me sound like I'm 1,000 years old, but I do. So and Outlook, there's not a client for Outlook on Linux as far as I know, at least on an official one. So I use Mozilla's Thunderbird, and honestly, Thunderbird is across all platforms. It's pretty awesome. The only thing I've noticed is like when I use it on Mac, it's a little resource heavy. So I'm hoping that they've taken care of that on Linux, and I'm pretty sure they did because it actually was built for Linux, which is great. Plus, I use Firefox for my browser on Linux because I've actually never used Chromium that much, mainly because I don't like the design of it. Which is funny because I like Chrome on Windows, but I didn't care for it on Linux. So I use Fire. So I'm a very big Mozilla fan on Linux. So anyways, Thunderbird is my pick. It's basically it's an Outlook kind of clone kind of thing. It's very has email, calendar, tasks.
I might have to try that.
Threaded messages. So I mean, it's really good. It's very, very, very full featured. Obviously free. So yeah, I really enjoyed that.
I tried the other one. Oh shit, I can't even remember the name now. But I tried this other one, and it was horrible. I couldn't get my accounts in, and it kept popping up all over the place, and I was like, and the funny thing is, it was recommended all over the place that like where I was looking. And I was like, okay, Gary, that's what it was called, Gary.
Yes, yeah. I looked at Gary.
That. Yeah.
And it looks pretty great, but because when you look at Gary, it looks almost identical to Apple Mail, right?
Yeah, that was the thing. Yeah,
And that's why you
did,
download like, oh, that looks like Apple Mail.
did not like me. I don't know.
I still might try it out, but
Yeah.
Thunderbird's kind of got my loyalty. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. It does.
Well, if you try it and you say it works for you, I might give it another shot. But I'm telling you, I tried to do it. It was popping up. It was telling me I couldn't get my accounts, and sorry, try again. And I would close it, and it would open it again. I was like, holy shit! I'll just stick to the browser.
Yeah. All right. So I think we'll close on a question. If you had to give one, other than what distro to use, because I think we've pretty much talked about that. If you had to give one piece of advice to a new Linux user, what would it be? Just quickly, Ricky.
Okay, if I had to give one piece of advice to a newbie Linux user, I think that would be it, is don't give up. Keep going past 2 weeks and you'll be good. No matter what happens, just use old hardware, that if you blow it up or whatever, you just reinstall the distro. So don't put a bunch of data on there. Just get your feet wet and to do stuff and learn the commands. And believe me, after 2 weeks, that's pretty much the learning curve. You'll be all right.
Yeah, I would probably. That's a very good piece of advice because when you use Linux for the first time, you're gonna want to try things out, and you're gonna want to dive into the terminal and learn awesome commands and download a crap ton of applications from shady sources online. I mean,
mod stuff and
you're gonna want to do it as much as possible because it's new and it's awesome. And then you realize that you can't use your computer anymore because your file system's corrupt, or you deleted, you pseudo deleted, something that you weren't supposed to delete.
And that's piece. That's also one piece of advice I'll give you that I learned the hard way. Linux is not like Mac and Windows. If you move a file in the terminal and you put in a path that does not exist, the file is gone. It is not gonna make the place. The file is gone. So don't do that.
Yeah, that's probably the one thing that people do most on Linux when they first start is delete things that they didn't really mean to delete.
Yep.
So my one piece of advice would be, don't put yourself down if you can't find the drivers for that particular distro.
Yes.
Drivers are always going to, so every new user's biggest complaint is always going to be drivers, especially if you're using third-party if you're using hardware that either you installed yourself or is original to your computer, like video cards, sound cards, microphones, monitors, printers, those things. While it's gotten a lot better, it used to be especially when we first started using Linux, from when I was actually able to use it, the driver system was not good.
Yeah, it was.
It was very much manual labor where you had to, either have it. They were usually pretty good for like modem drivers because you had to have those in order to connect to the internet. So they were usually pretty good for back when there was modems or network cards. They were usually pretty good at that. But past that, where you had to get drivers for like Linux, or not for Linux, but for like printers, cameras, things like that, it was all go to the website, download it, hope to God it works. Especially if you had to get the driver straight from like the manufacturer, say like a camera. Most of the time, those people completely ignore Linux.
Yeah. Or it'd be like, oh, if you use this driver for this model, it kind of works the one you have, but there's certain features that you can't use. You just gotta suck it up and wait until the manufacturer gives that to you.
Yeah, it is a lot better now, but Everyone is going to run into something with some kind of driver at some point during your Linux experience that they just won't have it. My advice would be is if it's not essential, don't worry about it. So like with my microphone, it's not that big of a deal. Obviously, if they don't have a driver for your video card or your network card or your trackpad on your laptop, that could be a problem. Then at that point, you really need to probably find yourself a different distro or go hunting for a driver. Just as Ricky said, don't give up. Google is really your friend when it comes to Linux, because you just get on there, you Google. Chances are, if you're having that problem, somebody else has had that problem. And they've posted some kind of tutorial online.
Yeah, that's the great thing. There's a ton of forums and information out there.
Yeah, and lots of forums where you can go in and ask questions. Just make sure you know what kind of hardware you're using.
Give all the details.
Put in specifics in your forum posts.
Yeah.
And chances are there's going to be a nerd out there who knows what they're talking about, and then they can walk you through getting it set up. Or they'll have advice for you to, move on. Yeah. If they go through and tell you, well, there's not really anything you can do about this, you have to find a different distro, then just, take their word for it. Obviously, multiple opinions, because some guy's just going to be a douchebag and say, well, delete your hard drive, or don't use Linux because you're too stupid. There's going to be those guys out there, so don't ignore those. Anyways, so that is it for us this week. Words are hard. Anyway, so we'll be back in 2 weeks, which will be the 29th of March, the day after my birthday. Happy birthday, Matt. And we don't know what we're going to talk about yet. We'll talk about that later. If you want to contact with us, you can do so. Our email is email@thelinuxcast.com. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at MTWB. Ricky is Ricky_Williams1. The podcast is at The Linux Cast. And we don't have a Facebook or anything like that quite yet. I'll get that set up in the next few weeks. Other than that, we're done, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
See you later, everyone.